Welcome to the American Soldier Podcast, where we dive deep into the stories of sacrifice and the unwavering spirit of those who have served our nation. Today, I'm honored to speak to retired Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann. Scott Mann is a decorated US Army Green Beret with extensive combat tours of some of the world's most challenging places. But he's also a storyteller. He's the president and founder of Rooftop Leadership, a New York Times bestseller, with his recent book, Operation Pineapple Express, the author of a powerful and poignant play, The Last Elegy of a Green Beret, which pulls back the curtain of the unseen cost of war. And most importantly, he's a man whose greatest pride is the legacy he builds with his family, his 26-year marriage, and his 3 sons. It's an honor to have Scott Mann on my show.
Yeah, so we did a play, went really, really well. It was really powerful. A lot of veterans in the audience from the, Tampa right there at Special Ops Command. A lot of Afghans in the audience and a lot of Gold Star families. And that's always just the coolest thing to me. But the other thing we did that was really different was I had written a coda for the abandonment of our allies. And it came to me kind of.
What you wrote a what? What is
a coda? Like just kind of a surprise ending.
Okay.
Play. And I hadn't any idea what I was going to do with this thing, but it came to me earlier on in the year. Basically, the setup was, my character's son, the whole thing's about his son joining up and fighting the war he couldn't finish. So with the abandonment, I keep asking myself, what's going to happen when our kids have to go back over there? And they are going to have to go back over there.
You think so?
Huh?
You really think so?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. Right now there are, I just interviewed an intel analyst yesterday, and so far in Afghanistan, since the abandonment, I think they've trained close to 30,000 suicide bombers.
30,000?
30,000. There's 6 camps there's 6 camps, and I think 3 are operating with complete autonomy for suicide bombers. They're just cranking them up. And yeah, I think there's.
You think any of them are here?
I do. I think and this is a lot of just kind of my own synthesis based on what I'm seeing, but I think that a lot what we saw on October 7th is more of a harbinger. What happened in Israel is more of a harbinger for what we're in for than September 11, 2001. I think you're going to see a more localized, horrific, distributed attack in the United States that is where we live, work, and play versus symbols.
Wow.
And I think the origins of that, and these guys, ISIS and AQ, they want to prove that this attack's bigger than the last one. They don't want to come in second. So yeah, I do. But I asked myself, all right, I've already kind of moved on past that, honestly. That's just, to me, it's a foregone conclusion. It's going to happen. And then how will we respond? Most likely, to me, is the big question. How will we respond, and what kind of situation are we putting our operators in when they have to go back? I mean, you imagine these commandos that were abandoned, their families have been executed, they've been living on the streets, and these guys are trained, man. They're legit. And what's going to happen when our young special operators come eyeball to eyeball with the commandos they abandoned? So I wrote a scene, a surprise ending where we did everything. We did the talk back, lights went down, and then we have, a lot of you on the road have asked us about what's going to happen in Afghanistan, and did it matter? Was it worth it? And so we did a scene with my son as a special operator and an Afghan actor out of LA named Fahim Fazli. And they confronted each other as my son's rolling up his parachute, and it was pretty intense, man. So that was a long story. I didn't mean to get into that.
No, it's okay. How long did it take? Well, let's go to some of the, I have a couple questions that I want to get into. I mean, you bring up 9/11, with the debacle of Afghanistan. I know I felt it because I was there at the Twin Towers when it happened, and I saw them come down with my own eyes. I ran out of them. It's kind of what basically started the spark for the American soldier. And so I felt betrayed. So I can't even imagine I remember when it was on the news, I felt like I was watching 9/11 again because I was on the news and I couldn't stop watching it. And my wife was like, what are you doing? I was like, you have no idea. This is a disaster. So if I felt that, I can't even imagine what you and your brothers and sisters who fought over there and all the families. And I also, I felt the families that I had been getting connected with over the years with the play and understanding their pain. So when we withdrew out of Afghanistan, I thought about them. I thought about 9/11. And it was like this hurricane of weird emotions, And so I just, I wanted to share that there are Americans that I know I felt the betrayal, and it bothered me. It still bothers me knowing that we pulled out that way. So anyway, I don't really have the words, but I pray, and I like I always say, I thank you for you guys for your service. And but so people who don't know you, you wrote this play, Last Out, Elegy for Green Beret. I mean, what gave you the idea to write the play? That's what I want to know. And I want to get into some of because I know that I've heard you many times talking about the military stuff, but I want to know, like, let's talk about the play.
Mm-hmm.
The play is so powerful. So did your wife go, are you kidding me? Like, you doing what now? Are you going to write a play?
Yeah.
Can you not sit with a bourbon on the backyard and just chill?
Yeah, it was like the ultimate midlife crisis, man. Writing a play and then deciding at age 50 to learn how to act and perform, the protagonist role. So it was a double whammy for my wife, Monty. And I honestly, though, I think my transition from, 2 decades of being a Green Beret and a lot of combat and the impact it had had on our family, she had already seen how dark it had gotten for me. And so pretty much anything that lit me up, to her credit, was let's do it. I don't care. If it lights you up and it gets you moving out of your bathrobe and actually, shaving every couple of weeks, like, let's give it a try.
Was it that bad for you?
Oh, it was standing in a closet holding a 45 bad. It got really, really bad. 18 months after I transitioned, it got to the lowest bottom.
What was the hardest part? Getting out of the military and losing that structure, or just dealing with PTS?
Well, I mean, they kind of go together. For me, it was this, I'd wanted to be a Green Beret since I was 14, right? So, I mean, it was all I knew. It was all I understood, and it was my identity. And when I left that world, I left my identity. I left my, when I retired in 2013, and there just wasn't a lot out there for folks, for guys, girls leaving the service to realize that, a lot of that stuff you don't have to leave in the team room. It comes with you. Your identity, purpose, your values, those are actually, you get to keep those. Those were not issued to you. But I didn't do that. I walked away and really just kind of left all of that behind me, shut the door on it, and started to try to become what I thought civil society wanted me to become, which was an absolute friggin' train wreck. And I got a job as a contractor, all that stuff, and managed it on the outside pretty well. I was making good money, but just the loss of identity, of purpose, was really profound. And then you couple that, all the stuff that I had pushed down, like so many of our guys and girls do. I pushed down the survivor's guilt, the PTS, the moral injuries, and when you get into that space where your identity is really in question and your purpose is wavering, that stuff just comes, that stuff just comes flooding in. And so it was kind of a perfect storm, honestly, that built up over 18 months until, I started having ideations that were super, super dangerous. And it was actually civilian mentors, man, that kind of brought me out of it. I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this, but I knew I had something to say.
I don't even know how we got connected. I think you reached out to me years ago. Someone connected us, and I can't remember. And I remember, I remember speaking to you because I remember I was at a friend's house, and I was like, I got to call this guy, this Green Beret. So I remember because I was at a backyard party, and my friends were like, "You gonna call who?" Yeah, there's a Green Beret. He wants to reach out, and I remember we connected, and that's how we got connected. So we haven't really talked much besides a couple
Yeah, I guess not. I think it was just yesterday, but I think that might have even been pre-COVID.
Oh yeah, it was definitely pre-COVID. It was like 4 years ago, man.
Yeah.
4 years ago.
Um, it got to the point where I don't even remember where I was, but I was not in a good
The writing. Well, I mean, I was asking you about, what got you the writing the play. I mean, to write a play, were you an artist as a kid? I know you wanted to be a Green Beret, but were you an artist as a kid? Did your dad or mom write, or somebody in your family write, or?
And my mom was yelling, no. Yeah, my dad's a musician and likes to play, but he doesn't write music. I think for me, I've always kind of been creative, but I think for me, I knew I had something to say when I got out of the military. I felt like I should be on stages. I liked the storytelling aspect. I didn't really have a language for it, but a former NFL football player named Bo Eason, who had played for the Oilers back in the 80s. His brother was Tony Eason, played for the Patriots.
Yeah.
Bo had blown his knee out for the 7th time and had entered into the world of acting and had some measured success with it, but not a lot, and decided to write his own thing, which I love.
And I think he wrote a play about concussion, didn't he?
He wrote a play called Runt of the Litter about becoming an NFL football player and his brother as a rival. But
I think I remember it.
I think you would, and it's just it's really cool because the guys I seem to be drawn to are the guys that write their own stuff, do their own stuff.
Yeah,
and I know you're really getting big on that right now, and I love it. And encouraging people to do that. So anyway, Bo, I saw him speak, and I was just enamored with how he moved around the stage. He moved like an operator because he was his physicality, he was in his body. And again, I didn't have a language for any of this stuff. I just knew that, like, looking at him, that's what I wanted to do. I knew that's what I wanted to do, and it actually just clicked with me. And so I talked to him afterwards, and he ended up mentoring me for a couple of years. And he taught me a lot of his craft in storytelling and stage, like speaking. And as a result of that, I started taking classes, and several of my coaches were acting coaches, and they kept saying, you should write a play, man. Like, this stuff is really powerful and it'll heal you, And so I wrote it really to heal myself, to kind of get them off back.
It's therapy, man. It's therapy. I mean, the play for me was also therapy. I mean, that's acting to me was therapy because I grew up with a very traumatic childhood. And so all my friends are in construction. They're all in construction. I grew up in Texas. And I mean, I'm known as the Joey of the group that I play football with. They're like, I remember when I told them I was going to get into acting, their heads almost did a 360. Acting, it shines a mirror onto life. And I always say, it gives you two reflections, it gives you the reflection that you don't want to be and the reflection that you want to be. And and that to you it's very therapeutic because as you're working on characters, or when you're writing your own character, you say, like, I want to be like that guy. And so that forces you to kind of be introspective and look at yourself. And then when you write the dark stuff, you're like, well, I got to be careful when I am that guy. And then again, you introspectively look at yourself. So you have a more, when you get into the world of acting, you have a better understanding of self because you become a human behavior analyst. And you're always studying, right? So where a lot of people are kind of, for the most part, their emotions kind of whip them around and they don't have any introspective of themselves. So that's the beauty about acting. And it is a form of therapy.
I agree. And I just didn't have a language for any of it at the time. I knew the play as I started to write it, I'd already written a couple of books. It felt better to do it. And then I did in one of my little acting classes I was doing down at Sarasota, I did a scene from the play at the time. This was like 2017, and it really was well received. And
I think most of the training is a Green Beret because I looked into what a Green Beret is. And you guys work a lot with the local indigenous people, and that's kind of like you guys. If I'm correct, Green Berets. They're more like they get wherever they're going, they get there and they work with the indigenous people in that area. So you have to be kind of like a chameleon in a way. You have to adjust and you have to kind of mold and you have to adapt different things. And that's acting really, because you're kind of a chameleon when you're an actor, either, character to character, or when you're playing just, a performance, you're trying to manipulate yourself to adjust to something. And that's, I think,
think that probably helped you as a Green Beret, because you're always, to be honest with you, we're all actors and we're always acting. Everyone's acting every single day. Some people do it at home, some people do it with their spouses, but if you're in acting, you get to do it on stage. And so there's always that version, because when you lie, you're acting. When you fib the truth, you're acting. And so as a Green Beret, landing in some far away place and trying to manipulate yourself, you're kind of twisting yourself in a way that would give you the seed of training to approach characters, to approach acting.
I looking back on it, it definitely did. I mean, like that line of work, you characterized it pretty well. I tell people that like a modern day Green Beret is kind of a combination of John Wick, Lawrence of Arabia, and the Verizon guy. I mean,
why the Verizon guy?
Well, because they're relationship-based connectors, but we go in with 12 guys, but you ride out with 12,000. Right. I mean, they're a strategic multiplier, and so it's not uncommon. So you build these massive networks. That's the funny thing about a Green Beret is like if you drop a Green Beret off in an embassy somewhere, you come back in a month, like he's co-opted the whole embassy. Like he knows everybody. He knows the mail clerk, and he's built a whole network. And that's why Pineapple Express was so successful. Yeah. And these other were so successful. It was 20 years of relationship. So yeah, you're right. I mean, that there definitely was that. And I think there's also, for me at least, there was this, I understand how to train, and I understand the relationship to practice. And I understand that if I'm going to be good at something, I have to surround myself by the best, and I have to do what they tell me to do and with full commitment. And that's what I loved about acting is I went to New York and I studied under Carl Bury and Larry Moss' son.
Nice guy.
And I think at first they wanted to see like, is this guy can't be serious. And when I showed them that I was, then they kind of said what you said. They were like, look, you got all the goods. You just got to be fully committed to this and just dive in. And I did. And as I did it, I actually started to feel way better. I mean, it was not just therapy for me. It was life-saving therapy for me. It changed everything in how I navigated the world and how I was available to the people I loved. And it just gave me all these tools that the craft of acting gave me all these tools for living.
Well, it's the mirror, man. Yeah, it's the mirror. George Bernard Shaw has a great quote, and you may want to hold on to it. It says, "We use a mirror to see our face, but we use art to see our souls." And that's the beauty of acting. I mean, acting changes everybody when they get into it, and that's the addiction of it as well, because it's so guttural. It's so, if you're doing it, if you're fully out, and trust me, there's actors who are not, they don't go full out and they drop out careers, so if you're committed to the craft and to understanding, it's really, to me, acting is really a surgical operation on human behavior. That's the way I look at it, because you're really analyzing things, and that's the beauty of it. Those are the tools that probably save you, and that's probably why when I'm vets see my play, they get so they get so moved and get so emotional, and they get a mouthpiece. But let me ask you, like, what is you have boys, right? 3 boys?
3 boys, yeah.
How old were they when you wrote? How old is the play?
It's been 6 years in development, maybe 7.
So when was the first time you put it on
November 10, 2018.
2018. And how old were your boys when they first saw it?
High school and junior high.
And what was the reaction then, and what's the reaction now?
Well, the reaction then was, really surprised, and I think proud, and just, I think, happy to see me in a place where I was fulfilled and doing something I loved. But they felt really connected to it as well. They felt like part of their life was up there. Yeah. But it's evolved, now, like my middle son, Cooper, who works for federal law enforcement, he's in the play. He actually plays my son. And he's never acted either. He started last summer, and he's
Is it Carl direct him as well?
Carl trained him. and directed him, yes. And then my oldest son is in the Army, doing what I did, following that path, following his own path. But he loves that kind of work. And he's had a lot of input on the play. He's given me a lot of insights into the play and things that he went through as the oldest child of a military dad in a family that knew nothing but war. And then my youngest son is playing. He's in college playing ball, not too far from where you are. He's up at Hudson Valley.
He's playing football,
baseball. And he's come to the play a lot, and all of them have come to the play a lot. They come backstage with it. It's very much a family affair. My wife has seen every show. She doesn't miss a show, and she's my biggest inspiration. And so
I love seeing the posts of you two. You guys seem very it's very special, very close together, which is beautiful.
I wouldn't have made it without her. There's no way I wouldn't be here.
And how has her reaction to the play changed? I mean, because it's, a play changes from the beginning to an end to where it's at now. I mean, there's just...
Yeah, it started with, why are you doing this? Why are you bringing all this stuff up again? Like, we finally put this behind us. You're retired. Why are we going back here? It started there. And then it was like, well, okay, if this makes you feel better, then we'll do. It was kind of like entertaining it. We spent a ton of money. I'm not even going to tell you how much money we spent on this play.
Well, I know. I have a good idea because I've done it myself.
And it really affected us financially. And that was tough. But then
that's a challenge with a multi-character play. I mean, that's why. How many characters are in your play?
Well, we have 6 in the cast. And then it's got 300 sound and light cues. I mean, it's intense, man. And so it's it's one of the reasons I'm looking really hard at a 1 or 2 person show for my next one.
Well, it has its challenges too. We can go into that, but if I could offer some suggestions on the light cues, for example, you can cut out a lot of your light cues as much as you don't think you can. You can slim those down. Sound you need. Right, audience will forgive you without light. They need sound. You can use sound as light.
Yeah,
and that can help you streamline the play a little bit. Because I know, my play was, when I first did my play, when it first got its sea legs, it was in an off-Broadway house, and so it was designed with all the bells and whistles. When I was first touring it, I would try to do all the bells and whistles. And I just quickly realized, like, this is not possible. I mean, it's too heavy. It's just so much work, and it's not. I can't sell this really down the country, because people just don't have the ability. And so I started to learn how to kind of just, okay, I don't need that light. 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 Sound I need, but sound is easy because you just run it off. I'm sure what do you guys use? QLab or something, right? Yeah, you just use QLab. You can do sound, so you can build. So take it for what it's worth. That's
great. And that's what we're looking at. Actually, we're looking at retooling the show.
And you can slim your characters down too, right? You can, just you don't think, you can go from 6 to 3, right? And you can kind of give each actor a kind of a one-person performance.
Yeah.
Where they perform 6, or I don't know how many characters, I mean, how you would break it up, but one actor performs 4 characters and the other actor performs 5 characters. And then, instead of being 6, you can be 3 or 4 people just traveling. So you can, you can find ways to. I mean, that's the challenge. That's why multi-character plays are so hard to get produced, because they're expensive. They're so expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. We did the first year in 2019. Well, back to Monty's reaction. So now she's really. One night she actually had to do the play because we didn't have understudy. We couldn't afford understudies in 2019. So
did she have to memorize the lines and all that stuff?
No, you know what we did? Lynn is the character who's my stage wife, right? And so the person that played Lynn lived in Orlando. She got in a minor car accident and she was okay. This was 30 minutes before we're supposed to, this is 30 minutes before the show starts. And so her husband calls us. She says, she's not coming. And so we're sitting there, and this is in Tampa at the Straz. We're like, oh, dear God, and all of a sudden, the guy at the time who's in the cast, Brian, he looks at Monty, and Monty's like, what? No. And then she starts, and he's like, you've seen every show, he's like, you could do it on book and it would still work. So we decided, look, all right. And Brian goes, get her a bottle of wine, Scott, walk away. All you're going to do is try to take care of her. I've got to get her ready. And so and we did. And so when it was time for the show to start, everybody comes out there. They're sitting in the audience. The stage manager walks out and says, listen, Aim Livingston's been in a car wreck. And you can hear everybody go, ah. And she's like, nope, she's fine. Mann, who's Scott's actual wife and who lived this experience, has bravely volunteered to be on book so that we can present you with this story. And the place went nuts. And Monty came out there and was on book and it was so fun. And two funny things that happened out of that is, one is there's a scene in there where my stage wife gets news, watching the news, and she screams. There's no dialogue except that. That came from my wife. So like she's on book all the way up until the scream scene, and like she lays the book down, and I'm like, oh God. And she actually did the scream, and it wrecked me. And then the other thing that happened that was super funny was, I guess an old couple had come in late to the play, and they didn't know that any of this was going on. And so they were walking out, and one of our front of house people heard them say, this lady said, I don't care what anybody says, those two have something going on. Do you see the way they were kissing?
What was there? I mean, that must have been a very surreal moment for her to actually to relive in her way her life now, because now the mirror of art is being shined on her now.
Everything changed for her in her perspective. And she said, don't ever do that to me again. Like, that's it. I'm not ever doing that again. But it did change for her. Her connection to the show just deepened so much. And we talked about that. And I was like, what was that like to have those autobiographical experiences? And she said it was really healing, and I think just she's always worked behind the scenes. And so for her to do that was one of the bravest things I've ever seen. And it showed me her commitment, not just to me, but to this project and to our veterans, because she didn't want those veterans and military families to not have that story. And it was really cool. And her perspective from then on changed. Now she's probably more adamant about the show than I am. Like it's her baby, and just not just that show, but our storytelling approach for veterans and families. She's a beast.
You had Rooftop before you did the play, right?
Yeah. Rooftop's my for-profit where I teach interpersonal skills that I learned as a Green Beret, active listening, story, narrative competence, nonverbal communication, like all how to build rapport in low trust environments. I teach that as a body of work in the corporate world. And that gives me the airspeed to do all the stuff on our hero's journey side, where we help warriors find their voice and tell their story. We do the play to show what's possible. These are all veterans and military family members. And then we run storytelling workshops.
Was that a specific choice to only cast veterans? Did you not think about casting actors? Why? Because there's pros and cons with that decision.
There were, and I went through a lot of them. I talked to Gary Sinise about it, Carl, Larry Moss. I think you and I even talked about it, and I just made the conscious choice that, look, if we're going to travel, and I also knew that you were doing your play, so I'm like, all right, this is going on in a couple of places across the country. If we can keep this thing I wanted to demonstrate that veterans and military family members can be prolific storytellers. And so 4 of our 6 cast members are not professional actors. They train very hard and they work very hard at it, but they have, JOBs that they do, and they do not pursue pursuits of acting in any other thing but this. And it really, I think it has served in that regard. And you're right, there are cons, and we've experienced them. But overall, for this particular show, it works. And I think we'll always probably keep it that way. But new stuff that I'm working on, I'm open to a range of things. But for that one, I think people have almost become accustomed to it now. It's like kind of something they talk about, seeing, because people think it's either going to be some self-indulgent, this one time at band camp military memoir, or an after school special, right? It's one of the two that will come in expecting, and I think they're pretty surprised when they see.
Yeah, a good story is a good story. The foundation of a good story is, hero, conflict, and desire, and if you have those 3 elements, it doesn't matter what it is, it's a good story. A good story falls apart when it doesn't have those 3, in my opinion, those 3 pillars: conflict, hero, and desire. And so, You mentioned Gary Sinise. Tell me, so that must have been, so, I'm sure you did it in bullshit places when you first started it. And then somehow you get connected with Gary Sinise, and now you're at the Steppenwolf. That's why I told you, you really, when you're performing, it's the beauty and the beast, in my industry is that, especially it's worse on film sets because, on film sets, you can always become a family with the people you're working with, especially if you all get along. And then you wrap and you're like, that's it. Boom. Everybody's gone in sort of their own different worlds. And you stay in contact with some, Facebook and whatever. And so in theater, it's the same thing. You work with the tech people, you work with people in the house, and you become really close, for those 2-3 days or a week, whatever it is, you're there, and then boom, it's over with. And so my experience, that's why, I wanted to kind of emphasize, really smell the roses, enjoy the moment, even the drudgery when you come into the little things, coming into a beautiful dressing room, having your shit always hung up, your shit prepared for you, that stuff is, because not all theater is always like that. When you're in that Mercedes-Benz of a theater experience, you really need to smell the leather, if that makes sense.
It was a great piece of advice you gave me. Just 1 second, I'm going to ask my dad something here.
Yeah.
Okay, brother. Sorry about that.
I'll give.
No, I was just going to say that. So 2 levels to that. I mean, as far as the smell the roses piece, we did a 2019 tour where we put 28,000 miles on a U-Haul van. Our support team, just like our cast. I mean, we had 1 professional actor in the cast at that time. There was 4 person in the cast. Our tour manager was an Air Force spouse who had lost her husband to suicide. We had a Gold Star mom. The 2 guys that drove the van and did all of our stage work were, Purple Heart best buddies from Iraq. I mean, we were the island of misfit toys, bro. I mean, it was, but we did it, and we performed in school cafeterias and just, but you get it, and I loved it. It was phenomenal. That was where Monty and I dropped most of our cash to keep it going and keep our people paid. And, we donate our time to it. That's how we it's just what we do. And we make our money on our revenue on the for-profit side. And it gives us airspeed. And for me, it is what I feel like I'm meant to do. And then we would run a storytelling workshop on the Hill on that Saturday for the local veterans and stuff. So call it our emotional breaching tool to open people up to storytelling. And then we would help them tell their stories. So that worked. And then COVID shut it down in our second season before we could even get going. And we raised the money and we made an Amazon Prime low budget film. And then Afghanistan collapsed. We were getting ready to launch that thing nationally, and Afghanistan collapsed. And it just pulled me back to that dark place. And I stood up the group, Task Force Pineapple. Yeah. And that was when I was talking about it on Fox News, talking about the play. He watched the play. John Andrasik from Five for Fighting had joined efforts with us on the Afghan thing and recommended to Gary to watch it. And that's when Gary watched it, and he reached out and offered to, put it up. And it was, you're right. I mean, the resourcing he brought to that changed everything. We had a production team out of New York. I mean, it changed. Carl Bury, we were able to bring him in, and it changed the whole show, quality of the show and the experience. And now we're back to, okay, that's over. That was great. But there's a lot of veterans out there hurting in these hard to find places, aircraft carriers. How do we get this thing lean and mean again? So we're actually going back to kind of where we came from. But thanks to your advice, I think everybody on that tour really, I tell them every time in our circle, smell the roses. Remember, guys, because I told them that first night in Phoenix when you had sent those, and that kind of became our battle cry. And it really was very, very special when we ran.
You really don't appreciate it as an actor. And, I've had the experience, and, it's easy to, oh man, this chair sucks, or it's cold in here, or where's my freaking costumes, or I'm tired today, because you do get tired, on their days you're going to get tired, and you're like, oh, it'd be nice to, go to a restaurant and having dinner, and you get to these points as a performer, you get these, there's resistance sometimes, but then you forget, hey man, this is, this is a once in a lifetime experience that we get to tour, to tour like a Broadway show, I mean, I remember when I performed at the Kennedy Center, that's kind of where I was like, holy crap, gotta be kidding me. This is all for me. But, you walk in, how you doing, Mr. Taurel? They grabbed my bags off of me, and they took me to the dressing room, I mean, it was, it's first class, same thing with me. I've performed in, chocolate factories and warehouses and hotel conference room. I mean, I've been everywhere. I've been, beautiful spaces, Library of Congress, off Broadway and stuff. But when you're in those great moments, you just have to smell the roses. You have to kind of remind yourself, oh, look at the dressing room, actually stare at the walls that you're in and say, oh, that's interesting, and because they become memories, and it's easy to get stuck on your phone and texting people, and you're just like kind of almost flying through it without living it, you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And I mean, that's so close to home for me because look, it is a memory now.
Yeah.
And I think back on all of the opportunities we had to interact with these amazing people, these Gold Star families, and to tell the story for them. But in some of the houses that we were in, they were so special. And it was honestly, it was a dream of a lifetime, to be honest, like for not just for me, but for our team, to be able to go into some of these beautiful theaters and be welcomed there and to be able to perform this story and have that memory, it is a once in a lifetime thing. And so that was great advice. It was much appreciated advice. And I'm glad that I did that because I think it really made us more mindful and intentional. Cause we only did one show a month, and it went really fast.
It flies by, man. It flies by. Just like life, it flies by. I mean, you're a fucking Steppenwolf, man. I mean, as an actor, I know Steppenwolf from years, I mean, Gary Sinise was a big inspiration for me. I did, he and Malkovich did True West at Cherry Lane in the Village in Manhattan. And that was, I was a big Malkovich fan and I loved True West. And I remember seeing video clips of it and I studied with Wynn Hanman. And so I knew True West really well, deeply. It is one of my favorite plays. And Sam Shepard, who wrote the play, he studied with Wynn Hanman. And Wynn, who was my mentor and my acting teacher, he told old stories about Sam all the time, and he would come to class sometimes. So I was like, well, I want to do True West. And so I did True West. And then Gary did Of Mice and Men. And like, well, I want to do Of Mice and Men. So then I produced Of Mice and Men and I played George, So when you work when you're on a production like that, it's it's such a special experience that you don't really understand it, and when you're at the Steppenwolf, the history goes back all the way from the Cherry Lane. I mean, the Cherry Lane was that's where everybody wanted to act at when acting in the 70s and 60s. And man, I think the Cherry Lane was founded in the 50s. It's actually, I don't think it's barely hanging on now, but everybody who you've seen on TV from our generation was trying to get on the Cherry Lane. And then they started the Steppenwolf. And so there was a big connection between actors in New York and Steppenwolf because that was him and John Malkovich. And John Malkovich was he was legendary in acting because he was the type of actor. I mean, there's crazy stories about John Malkovich in the acting stories, but I mean, he would go up to you on stage at the Steppenwolf and he'd grab your nuts and he says, I don't think you're focusing. and then he just keep going. And he was like that. And and actors were just like terrified of John Malkovich. So Steppenwolf has a tremendous artistic history for actors. Like it's very well, it's a fucking holy grail, man. It's, so for you guys to be on that stage, and breathe the air that, Gary and John Malkovich started when they were babies, basically, is quite special. And that's why I was like, man, smell these roses, dude, because you're on a special journey.
It was. And I think it was, the other thing that was really cool was you had this blending of the military community and the theatrical community. And it really, there was a deep respect of both. And a lot of that I attribute to kind of my friendship with Carl. Carl seemed to really get our world, and I like to think that I got his world, and that they merged. And so when things like Steppenwolf happened, it, you could see, like, in Heather's eyes and Brian's eyes and Carl's eyes where we were. Like, you knew where the first special ops imperative is know your operational environment, right? And and you knew, like, everyone really knew and respected.
Sure. I mean, I know Carl probably knew, because Carl is probably, he understands that history as well as I do, and he was probably like, guys, we're walking holy grail here.
He made that very clear, from Jump Street, and particularly considering it was where we were kicking off the season, the tour, and there were a lot of cool things that happened on that particular show. But I mean, all things considered, when I look at the year, for me, my mission set at the end of, after the Afghanistan collapse and withdrawal, the only reason I put the play back up, I wasn't going to put the play back up. I mean, I'd moved on, was because our military community is hurting so badly. And like I testified to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, we're on the front end of a mental health tsunami with veteran mental health. Like, if you think it's now, it's going to get worse. And a lot of the, there's no silver bullet out there, but if we allow America to turn the page on service, like, Serve Pro, like it never even happened, while at the same time, our families of the fallen and our war fighters are going, did it even matter? Like, did it even matter? That is the devil's cocktail, man. And so anything that we can do, I believe, to get out there and help our civilians understand the cost of modern war, and B, remind our military community members that it did matter and it still does matter, is life-saving. And you're doing it, man. I have to say, like, I am in awe of your commitment to this mission. And you may have your own way of framing it, but you are definitely doing those two things. And we need all the help we can. It's all hands on deck right now.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the reaction, people always ask me in the Q&As, life is weird. When I graduated high school out of playing Texas football, every recruiter, I'm blind in my left eye, and every recruiter was calling me. You graduate, you play Texas high school football, and you're on the A list for recruiters to call you, and they know when you graduate, they're calling you. And the Army called me, and I told them I was blind, and they said, well, I think you'll have a great life, son, but I don't think the military's for you. And Marines call. I told them the same thing. I think even the Coast Guard called, and I said, hey, man, before you even start speaking, dude, let me just tell you right now that I'm blind in my left eye. So I thought that was it for the military. Like, I would have no connection with the military. Like, that would be some other world that other people do. So fast forward, life, God has, he has, I guess he has a plan, but he always has the last laugh. So when I went, I left here with my wife, my girlfriend then, my wife now, 30 years. I was like, well, I got to get out of Texas. If I'm going to act, I got to go either LA or New York. And she wanted to go to grad school, so we went to New York. And so 2000, we landed there, and 9/11 happened. And I was coming out of the North Tower. And so I just got completely turned on to what was happening in the Middle East, and I've always been a kind of guy. I boxed in college, so I was always the kind of guy who, like, if you hit me, I'm going to hit you back. And if you gave me a shoulder in the hallways, I'm going to give you another one back. And so when 9/11 happened, I wanted to get them, man. I was like, I want to get those motherfuckers, get them. So I became just obsessed with reading about the war and about what was happening in Iraq and then in Afghanistan. And so then I started reading stories about guys who were struggling with PTS. And that's really where I was like, man. And then I was, New York is so freaking jaded that, it was by this time, it was around 2006, 2007. I knew we were deep into the wars, but New York had moved on. It was trying to move on, and I felt, so fast forward, when I first performed the play, I had this itch. I just wanted people to understand what was going on in the Middle East. I just needed people to understand. And my dad was really patriotic. He was he's passed, but he was a Argentinian Jew, and he was always very, very proud American. And he was always grateful for what America did during the Second World War. He used to always watch the show called World at War. I don't know if you ever remember it. And it used to drive me nuts when I would come home from school. He'd still be watching. It was basically the Hitler channel. But when I first performed it in the Lower East Side, I did it for a workshop, and that would be the other advice I would share with you. But it sucked when I first did it. It really sucked, and I know it sucked. I felt it sucked. I know when a place sucks, and I was in it, and I was like, oh my God, it was the worst. But you have to kind of like when the military say, enjoy the suck. It's the same thing in art. When you first start, you got to really enjoy the suck, because it's only temporary. If you keep working on it and getting feedback, it gets better. But then we fast forward, we found in 2014, we found finally a theater festival had accepted me, and then they turned me, and then they went bankrupt. The New York Fringe Festival, which is this huge festival in New York, was really popular, and it was kind of a festival to be. And then 2014, they accepted me, and then they went bankrupt. And I was like, fuck. So then I found this one bullshit little Lower East Side. I had applied to them earlier, and they said no to me. And they finally came back to me. It was in the Memorial weekend of 2015. It was a rainy Sunday night, and they said, look, man, we need someone dropped out. I remember you applied. Can you, if you're off book, can you jump in? Can you do 20 minutes? And I said, yeah, I'm ready to go, man. And so I jumped in, and I thought that was going to be the last time. I really thought that was going to be it. It's like, finally, I got my festival. I'm going to get it up, and I had been working on this play for a long time. I mean, I've always been a history buff. So I would go to the New York Public Library, Scott, and I would just read veteran letters. I mean, like, so masochistic, thing I had of myself. I would just sit there and read them over and over, and I would check out books. I'd Xerox them, I'd read letters from Vietnam, from World War II, from the Civil War, Revolution, 1812, and I was fascinated by it. I was like going down a rabbit hole, I would come back, and I would go to an audition in the city. I'd finish it, and if I had a break, my wife was she was working at Pfizer at the time I started creating it, and I would, instead of going back to Hoboken, I would just go to the New York Public Library and check out books and read them and get stories. And so I didn't know what to do with it. No one knew what to do with it. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that when I finally performed it, I was like, fuck, I'm done. Thank God I'm done with this thing, man. Because, my wife was like, what are you going to do? And people were like, what are you doing? And directors didn't know. I would ask directors, and they were like, what do you want to do with all these letters, man? This is kind of, I don't think anybody wants to see this stuff. People said all kinds of stuff, which is another advice. Just get focused on what you want to do, because everyone's going to give you their opinion, and especially in the art. And 9 times out of 10, it's worthless. And so when I first performed it in the Lower East Side Manhattan, 8 people showed up. There was 2 shows, and 3 were only for me. It was my director, a photographer that I hired, and a friend of mine who came to see the play. And the other 5 were for her. She was doing a play about being overweight, and it was called Big Skinny, being overweight and not having her affection for her dad. And I remember telling the producers, please let me go first. Like, I don't want to go after that. I don't think they're going to get what I'm doing after that play. So she said, yeah, you can go first. And a Gold Star sister came up to me after the play, and that was the first time. I mean, I got a standing ovation, and I share that a lot, but it wasn't a standing ovation. It was that I felt the voice of the play. I felt kind of like it woke up. The play had finally woken up. And this sister came up, she lost her brother in Afghanistan, and she was really emotional. And she said, I really appreciate what you're doing, and I hope you don't ever stop. And I said, well, I'll try not to, I think this might be the last time. She goes, well, you should think about keep going. And so that was the first time that, and my director was there. And I had, to be honest with you, my director, who was a really accomplished solo show artist, solo show director, he was kind of like gun for hire for me, because I got so frustrated that I couldn't find a director that I finally just fucking found someone and said, look, I'm going to pay you $200 to watch me perform a monologue. I just want you to perform I just want to perform a monologue for you. Tell me what you think, and just help me craft it. And he said, sure, and then he said, that's kind of interesting. You want to do some more? And I said, yeah, I've got some more. And so anyway, I said, how much would it cost? How much can I hire you for to help me do like 20 minutes? Because I just got to get this thing up. This is an itch that I've got to get up. And he says, well, he gave me a price. And so, but after that performance, that sister came up. He was like, holy shit, I think maybe we have something here that we didn't think we had. And so we flushed it out, and we took it when we made it 40 minutes. And then the next performance, my wife is Scottish, and I perform at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, which would be a good festival for you to think about. And we can talk about that. But I took it there to Edinburgh, and that's where the play blew up, man. And that's where I got nominated for an Amnesty International Award. And then what people don't understand is in the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, have you ever heard of it? I lost your voice. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
No, we're good. Yeah, absolutely. I've heard of it.
Yeah. And so there's when I did it once in 2005, I took True West in 2005, and it did really well. And then in 2015, my wife goes, well, let's just go to Scotland and do it. And, we had a place to stay because her parents were there in Edinburgh. And so I said, we got married on a stage in Edinburgh. And I said, fuck, man, you can't take a American play about American soldiers to Scotland called The American Soldier. They're going to throw rocks at me, man. They're going to be like, who is this dude? So he's going to have balls of an elephant. And so, but what I didn't realize when I first performed it there was, there's like 3,500 shows there, man. It's like everyone and their dog. I think there's even more now. In fact, there's so many shows there that a lot of the locals there, they hate the festival because it overruns the whole city for 3-4 weeks. But I didn't know that. I knew, but it didn't dawn on me how many Irish, Scots, and Brits were suffering with PTS because they were also fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they're the ones that I have a Q&A after the play, but they kind of crafted the Q&A for me because after the play, they would come up to me and they wanted to talk to me. Like they wanted to share their story. They wanted to know who I was. Was I a veteran? Blah, blah, blah. And so I started after Scotland. I said, man, look, let's just do a Q&A after the play because people they're not going to leave the theater until we do a Q&A. So yeah. And so, 44 cities, almost 9 years later, here goes, and that was that was something. I have a question for you, and I'd like to get your advice on it, because sometimes for me, I'm not a veteran, so when I get a veteran who really breaks down on me. I happened just now in Edinburgh, Texas. I had finished the play. We were doing 3 shows there, and I was just kind of, I have a trunk and a table, and it gets moved around. So I'm really kind of OCD when I start the next day. So I like to get everything ready back the way it is. So when I come into the theater the next day, it's ready to go for me. So a couple of people were there, and it was 2, 3. The whole theater had after the Q&A had kind of flushed out, and I saw this veteran sitting up in the house, and I noticed him, but I figured he's either gonna come down and say hi to me or something, or he's gonna eventually leave or something, or he's on his phone. And he stayed there, and I was talking to my niece who was there at the play, and the producer of the house, and I said, excuse me, sir, is there something I can do for you? You all right? And he just started walking down, and he just fell into my arms and just started crying. And everybody kind of scattered, and I sat down with him, and he told me he lost 2 friends this year, and he's losing faith. And I've talked to a lot of vets, and I'm friends with Brian Eish. I don't know if you know him. He's got a documentary out. It came out years ago. It's on Netflix called Father, Soldier, Son. And he said, you got to tell these guys. I told him what I know from what I've been told to tell. I said, you got to keep going. You can't give up. You owe it to the guys who didn't come back to keep going. Find a way to talk. Find someone to talk to. You got to promise me. So, are those the good words? Are those the right words?
I mean, I think that's a lot of the best we can do, and just, a lot of times it's just they want to be seen and heard, they're so isolated. It is, what we try to do, and we're a little, our team's a little bigger. I don't know if this first one is every show I do, I have a trauma interventionist there.
You pay for them to come there?
I do, but we're a nonprofit. So we raise that's part of it. That's just part of what we do is that we have a trauma interventionist postured to intervene. And, we've done that for years. Like it's just what, even when I run my storytelling workshops with no play, I have a trauma interventionist on hand because you just don't know what you're going to get, and if somebody gets into a deep sympathetic state, we're not equipped for that. We're just not equipped to handle that. And so I want to,
and that's a heavy load for you as a production, man.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, we've encountered some shit, bro.
Oh, I know it. I've seen it too, man.
And so, but I think what you did is on point. I think for the most part, other than having a trauma interventionist or, a lot of times, man, honestly, if you contact, like if you reach out the town you're going to, maybe start with the VA or local veterans, suicide awareness group. It's just say, look, I'm doing a play in this town. Could you help me find a trauma interventionist to be on hand?
Good advice.
And I bet they would, and they probably would volunteer their time. We pay for them because they we ask a lot of them. They participate in the talk back, like they travel with us. They help us because everybody in our cast just about has PTS, traumatic brain injury, and survivor's guilt. Like we're dealing with our own crap, and we don't necessarily have decades of craft like you do to do a lot of that stuff pre-show. So we have, sometimes we get jammed. Sometimes I get jammed, and I have to have my interventionist get in there and help me resolve that trauma real time. But I think, back to your question, what you said and how you handle that, I think that's the best we can do, honestly, unless you follow up somehow, and that's really tough. That's hard to do.
I wrote him a letter. I always ask, because I've had many experiences similar to that, but that was the first time a guy really broke down like that. I mean, he melted on me basically, and so I asked for his home address. So I wrote him a letter. I mean, I had a guy. I performed in an armory once, man, in the middle of the freaking Hudson River. And some of the West Point community was there. And I had this big old guy. He had his arms like this. I was outside and his arms were crossed. And he was just looking at me. And I was like, oh, shit, man, I'm going to get off this. I'm going to finish this play. And this dude's going to come up to me and he's going to give me the riot act, man. But same thing. He started saying, can I talk to you privately? And I said, yeah. And so he just broke down, same thing. And Sean Cannoli, and I mean, it's been amazing. I don't know if you've been getting connected with a lot of the vets, but that's been the amazing thing with me with the vets is that you've become friends. Like look at me and you, man. I went to New York to study, to get on Broadway. I didn't think I was going to be talking to Green Berets and SEALs and people. I thought I was going to be. It's weird, and so, and every time I perform, I get these amazing messages from people that I've connected with around the country, And I agree with you. I know there's a lot of pain, and I know Afghanistan has caused a tremendous amount of hurt. And I know, like I said in the beginning, if I felt the pain, I can only imagine what guys who've lost their brothers, who've lost their arms, who fought over there. I can only imagine the pain and suffering that they're going through right now.
Well, they are, but you know what, man? Look, here's the thing: is what I like about what you're doing, what really stands out to me about what you're doing, and gives me a lot of inspiration. And I don't think it's just so you are doing this play about war and you're telling the story, but civil society has used storytelling to bring warriors home for tens of thousands of years. Like, kind of where you geek out on the letters from soldiers, I geek out on the social science aspects of human connection, because as a Green Beret, like I still teach that to Green Berets and FBI undercover guys. Like, how do you build, the civil societies use storytelling for thousands of years. I study it a lot, and there's just a lot of data and a lot of science that backs up the power of storytelling.
Well, I mean, have you read, so I don't know if you've read Sophocles' Achilles. Achilles is all about PTS. It's all about him going on a mad rage, just killing people. And Sophocles was talking about PTS. The Greeks, a lot of the 80% of the Greek population served in the military, and the Greeks were at war for 80 years. This is 500 BC. We're going way back. So PTS has been studied, and they use storytelling. And then, Shakespeare talks about in storytelling. Shakespeare talks about it in Henry IV, Part 4 with Kate. When Hotspur comes back from battling Prince Hal, and she's like, you don't sleep, you don't talk, you don't look at me anymore. It's directly talking about PTS, and the Native Americans used storytelling and talked about PTS. We just have, I don't know why. And I would have thought that people in your community, the military community, at least after Vietnam, would have had a better plan to get guys to come back home. But, in the Cherokees and the Comanches, when they would go to war, when they would come back, the men and the horses would separate. And they would go just themselves, and they dance, and they would pray, and they would light fires, and they would kind of basically decompress before they joined the village again. And it was a way of them healing. And then the villagers would recognize it, and they would have dances around them. The Indians were really good about bringing their warriors home. And they understood their sacrifice. And there's a couple of people, I've done some fundraisers who are using equine therapy and canine therapy to help vets, but the power of animals is incredible. But I don't know why we don't do that in the military.
Well, storytelling is a natural component to all of that, regardless of whatever protocol you're using, bringing storytelling alongside it. And, what I like, and it doesn't have to be for military stuff either. It could be, our healthcare society is dealing with a lot of moral injury coming out of COVID, and having to violate kind of some of their codes when people expired when they wanted to have their hands on them. Like there's a lot of stuff going on in our civil society right now. And what I like about what you're doing is, you're not only talking about storytelling, but you're talking about writing and putting your own stuff out there. And the title of my next book that I'm working on right now is Nobody's Coming to Save You, a Green Beret's Guide to Getting Big Shit Done. And honestly, man, like I've just subscribed to this notion that nobody's coming. And I don't mean that like in a nihilist kind of way, like, we're all doom and gloom. I just mean that the bulk of the stuff in our life that really matters is the stuff that we do ourselves. And if we see there's a problem, if we see there's something broken, step into the arena and lead, and in this case, art can do so much to redistribute the emotional load that a few veterans and their families are carrying onto the broader shoulders of the community. And I just think that's a really good place to be over the next few years. At least for me, it's where I'm going to put my time. It helps heal me and it helps heal others.
No, I think it's incredible. I mean, I should have started. I mean, I think you're a veteran that, Brian Eisch always says, you got to find the key to coming back home is finding something you love, finding your passion, and those two things. And for him, he's a big fisherman, and he was like, "Man, I told my wife I'm going fishing whether you like it or not. Like I'm going fishing." And so for you, writing it's. I think you're a veteran that can give a lot of inspiration and a lot of guide to a lot of guys, out there who don't know what to do with themselves. You know, they're really lost, and writing is such a powerful thing. So I think you're a great beacon of hope for guys, because a lot of guys like, oh, I'm not a writer, or I'm not an actor, I can't do that, and they can. They just have to put pen to paper, or finger to keyboard. What's your process when you write your book? I'm curious.
So, usually I believe that movement and meaning are inextricably linked. Ivan Taurel says that in the book, The Human Givens. And, we're meaning-seeking creatures, meaning-assigning creatures, and we usually find meaning in movement. So for me, when I am full-on working out, that's usually when visions come to me for a concept or a story or an approach or a speech or a play or a scene. It's when I'm moving, and it's usually when I'm moving and I'm pushing up against the edge of my own physical ability.
More tactically, do you like wake up in the morning and write, or do you?
Oh, yeah, you're talking about like process. Yeah. For me, I'm very Stephen Pressfield-esque. Sit down and do your work. I have a 4-hour block. I sit down. I work in a 25-minute time set, and then I have a break for 5, and then I write again. And after 4 hours, I'm done. That's it. I'm done for the day. Pack it up and do it again tomorrow until
do you do it every day?
If I'm writing a book or a play or something like that, speech. Yeah.
Do you outline your books first?
Yeah, I do some degree of outline on a whiteboard. I'll try to get that, and then it usually goes in the shit can after, a couple of days of iterating, and I do it again. But yeah, I do some kind of macro outline on a whiteboard. That always tends to kind of help me.
Yeah. That's, well, I mean, the advice that I can give you, if you want to do a one-man show, Pineapple Express, I know, man, I was thinking of you doing Pineapple Express. I really was. I reached out to you a couple times. I gave what I could. I wish I could have done more, man.
Oh, I appreciate it. I think, look, here's what I would like to do. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the book or listen to it.
Pineapple Express? Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to pull up with you just separately. And I think there's...
Let me figure it out. It's cutting your voice out completely.
Okay, let me go this way. I think there's a real opportunity with that story to do something theatrically, and I'm not totally sure what it is yet, but I'm going to start leaning into it hard in 2024, and I'd like to talk to you more about it.
I mean, what I would say is the 3 biggest advice I can give you for a one-man show is, but make sure you have the 3 fundamentals, which I just told you. You got to have a hero. You've got to have desire. What does he want? He's got to want something, and conflict, right? Doesn't have to get it, but there has to be conflict. He can lose. Your hero can win or lose, but we got to see him trying. That's the main thing. We got to see him try. I always give the Rocky analogy. Rocky loses the fight, but his goal, he went the distance. Exactly, he went the distance, and so. We got to see that struggle. And then the other thing is, is it Scott Mann? Is it man versus man, man versus nature, or man versus life? Or himself. Those are the kind of the 3 elements in a one-man show that you want to play with. Is it Scott going through Pineapple Express? I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I don't want to do this. I don't want to get back in there, but you got to do it. You got to do. You're fighting. You're battling 2 Scotts. Almost. Like. Do it, don't do it, shut up, don't do it, or, fighting an extra thing. Those are the things to think about when you write the one-man show. And then a lot of people who get terrified with one-man shows is just enjoy the suck.
Yeah.
Because it gets better after the suck. The thing is, you need the suck first, right? And once you have the suck and you perform it for, 5 people in your living room, you take notes. You say what you like, what you didn't like, and you reapply it and you work it. And then, people look at the American soldier and they think, oh my gosh, that's, they haven't seen the iteration of it from, when it sucked, when I actually was wearing the Civil War jacket, Trying to do a Civil War piece, and people are like, "What the fuck is that dude doing, man?"
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm going to be there, and I want to.
In Knoxville?
No, I'm coming to. Are you in Pennsylvania? I'm coming to the one in Pennsylvania.
No, you mean Michigan? I think Clinton.
Maybe it is Michigan. Sorry, yeah.
That's a far trek for you, man, because you're gonna have to drive to it.
Yeah, but I can get to it quicker. Like it's a sooner performance than the Knoxville one, I think.
Yeah, well, it's not too far. You basically just fly into Detroit, and then from Detroit, you're gonna.
Yeah. I've already, and I think my son's coming with me too, Cooper, who's also in the play. So we're looking forward to it. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, what are your thoughts? Like, because of Pineapple, there are so many accents and so much, there's such an Afghan dimension to it. What are your thoughts on that from a one-person show perspective?
Well, you have to create character. It doesn't have, you don't have, like, the audience will forgive you on a bad accent, without a doubt, if you want to do an accent. And if you don't do an accent, you don't have to, but you have to create character. So if you're playing, let's say, Nassam, right? Then you have to, you're going to have to put on a piece of clothing or something to kind of let the audience know, this is Nassam. Let me use the word caricature in acting. Caricature is always really good for audiences, and they're really great for one-man shows because they define character. So if you give your character a physical
gesture,
movement or something, that the audience can define that character. And if you give it an accent, I do both in mine, but I mean, you have to kind of choose and separate. But the audience will forgive you in a bad accent if you commit physically. That's the thing, the audience will always forgive you if you commit physically. I mean, you can't on stage, you can't lie to an audience. Like, they get it right away, right? Like, if you're like, if you're thinking, I don't want to look stupid, I think I may look stupid, audience gets that, and they check out. They're like, he sucks. But if they see a Green Beret fully physically morphing himself physically, just not necessarily with an accent, but physically, then they get it, man. They'll go with you. I mean, the audience is really forgiving when they see the actor go all the way. And then the other piece of things you could do, I mean, now we're going deep into the art of acting, but as ifs are really powerful. I don't know if you've heard of the word as ifs. So this is as if, and as ifs are very personal. There can be anything. The psalm, I don't know what your plan on the one-man show is, but let's say I'm just going to be using the psalm as an example. The psalm reminds me of a cricket who's dancing, and then you act like a cricket who's dancing, and then you do in the song like a cricket who's dancing, right? And that's your character, and then and that's how you start breaking these different people apart, And I would also start small, though, Scott. I would do like 10 minutes, or 20 minutes, right? So I'm just going to get 20 minutes up or 15 minutes up and kind of get an arc, see what do I want to say, because it's going to change, I mean, and when I first did The American Soldier, I had Shakespeare in it. And as I remember, I did it for some really big people. I don't know if you've heard Playwright Horizons, but Playwright Horizons is this big off-Broadway house in Manhattan. It's kind of like almost a Broadway house. And I knew one of the board members, and he came to the play, and he loved it. He was like, man, I think what you're doing is really interesting. This is 2013, 2014. Did it some bullshit studio in Manhattan. And he's like, but I think you may want to get rid of the Shakespeare. It doesn't really work. Like, it takes me out of what you're doing. Like, I'm with you, you're doing all these great, characters, and then boom, Shakespeare comes at me, and it's like, what? And so you'll get that kind of feedback when you first do it. You're like, whatever it is you're doing, they're like, that's really good, Scott, but when you go in this direction, I don't get it, This thing you have to listen to them. And then the other advice I would give you is do it multiple times. A playwright gave me a really good piece of advice. When I perform at the Fringe, I did really good in the reviews, but I kept getting this one character, kept getting the same review. It just over and over. It kept getting doxxed. Like they didn't like it, what I was saying. I did this thing where, and my whole intention was to talk about how you're away from women, and I got that out of World War I. So I would say the word titties in this one character all the time, and breast, and none of the reviewers got it. And so, but I liked the line, and a lot of my characters, they would refer to women with breasts, but it was mainly because I wanted to show the I'm losing the word, but this connection that when you're a boy being separated from a woman, that was my idea, holding to a woman, there's something very different between a man and a woman with breasts, and holding, and I wanted to give that connection. When you're off the war in the trenches in World War I, you do anything to hold a woman again, and you do, when you're off in Afghanistan, the smell of a woman, you miss just the smell of a woman. So that was where I was going at, this really, primate feeling, but that no one was getting it. And so the playwright said, look, you don't have to listen to the to the reviewers. But if they're all saying the same thing, you may want to listen to what they're saying to adjust. Doesn't mean you have to go that direction, but there is something. And so it was really good advice, because I changed it. I did. And I said, and I kept getting the same note, and I kept getting the same review. They would love it. And then they'd say, it's really, he's really ridiculous when he goes in this direction. And so, not that you want to listen to reviews, but if you do it 3-4 times and people give you the same note, take that in, right? Take that in as an artist, because now you're an artist, right? And you take that in and you say, okay, they're not getting this. I got to go in a different direction. And so that would be another piece of advice that I would give you. Start small, take the advice, make sure you have your fundamentals, and commit physically. Enjoy the suck. You really just enjoy the suck, because you're going to suck. I'm going to promise you right now, you're going to suck.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like going from a pretty well developed play after 6 years back to this shit again. It's like, oh my God. But
and that's the process too, brother. I mean, that's always the process, right? To keep going back and forth, and so I guess what's next is for you to get this one man show up. I would really love for us to somehow find a way to do a play, both of our plays together, like on
let's commit to trying to do that in 24.
Yeah. Oh, big shit, man. It comes by fast, man. I already have 3 bookings.
Yeah.
This year it was really busy, so I'm gonna.
Even if we book in 24 and we do it in 25, but let's try to get intentional about it this year.
You're in Tampa, right? Yeah, you're in Tampa. Yeah, it would do great in Tampa, Sarasota. You're not far from Sarasota.
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
Well, I think I'm going to attend to my folks. I think you probably got a bolt too.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you being on here, man. And so,
love what you're doing.
Yeah, you too, man. It was great to finally talk to you, because I don't think I've ever really had a long conversation.
Yeah, and it won't be the last time. I'll be reaching out to you, and if I can do any, I can't wait to see your show, man. I'll keep you posted.
Hey, keep me posted, man. All my best to you and your family, brother. All right, man. Let's wrap it up, man. Thanks, man. And happy holidays and have a good New Year, brother. Thank you for listening to the American Soldier Podcast. If you like this episode, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more episodes like this, please subscribe to the channel. And to every veteran and to every military family, I thank you for your service and your incredible sacrifice to this nation.